The sound of expensive crystal shattering against marble flooring echoed through the 42nd floor executive office as Natalie Brooks watched her boss collapse behind his mahogany desk. Adrian Kane, the 34-year-old billionaire CEO of Kane Industries, clutched his chest while gasping for air, his usually perfect dark hair disheveled and his white dress shirt soaked with sweat. For a terrifying moment, Natalie thought she was witnessing a heart attack. "Mr. Kane." She rushed around the desk, her worn sneakers sliding slightly on the polished floor. Her hands trembled as she reached for him, unsure whether to call 911 or try to help him herself. The contrast between them was stark, her simple jeans and university sweatshirt against his $1,000 suit that now hung loose on his exhausted frame. Adrian's steel-gray eyes found hers, and he managed to shake his head weakly. Not a heart attack," he wheezed, slowly straightening in his leather chair. "Just exhaustion. Haven't slept in 3 days." His voice, usually commanding and confident during board meetings, sounded hollow and defeated. Natalie had been working as his personal assistant for 6 months, ever since dropping out of her senior year at Columbia University when her mother's cancer treatments drained their savings. She'd seen Adrian work 18-hour days, survive on nothing but black coffee and determination, and push himself beyond human limits. But she'd never seen him this vulnerable, this broken. "You need to see a doctor," she said firmly, surprised by her own boldness. Most employees were too intimidated to speak directly to Adrian Kane, but something about seeing him so fragile made her forget about hierarchies and paychecks. He laughed bitterly, running a shaking hand through his hair. "Doctors can't fix what's wrong with me, Natalie." The way he said her name, soft and almost intimate, made her heart skip a beat. In 6 months, their interactions had been strictly professional, yet now she felt like she was seeing the real person behind the corporate mask. "What do you mean?" she asked gently, kneeling beside his chair despite knowing how inappropriate it was. But something in his expression told her this moment was important, that whatever happened next would change everything between them. Adrian looked at her for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her face as if seeing her for the first time. Natalie had always felt invisible in his presence, just another employee in his vast empire. She was pretty in a girl-next-door way, with warm brown skin, natural black hair usually pulled into a simple ponytail, and kind brown eyes that reflected her genuine nature. Nothing like the sophisticated socialites she'd seen photographed with him in business magazines. "The Yamamoto deal," he said finally, his voice growing stronger. $3 billion in contracts that could expand Kane Industries globally. But there's a problem. He paused, seeming to wrestle with himself before continuing. "The Yamamoto family are traditional Japanese investors. They believe business partnerships should reflect personal stability and family values. They want to meet my wife." Natalie's eyebrows furrowed in confusion. "But you're not married." "Exactly." Adrian stood slowly, walking to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Manhattan. Even exhausted and disheveled, he commanded attention, tall and broad-shouldered, with sharp features and an intensity that made people notice him. "I've built this company from nothing, Natalie. After my parents and sister died in that car accident 10 years ago, work became everything. I never made time for relationships, never wanted the distraction or vulnerability that comes with caring about someone." "I'm sorry about your family," Natalie said softly, understanding flooding through her. She'd lost her father when she was 16 and knew how grief could reshape a person's entire world. Adrian turned from the window, his expression unreadable. "The Yamamotos are flying in from Tokyo next month. If I can't prove I'm a stable family man worthy of their trust, we lose the deal. And if we lose this deal..." He paused, the weight of his empire's future heavy in his voice. "I'll have to lay off 1,200 employees. Good people with families who depend on Kane Industries." Natalie stood, sensing where this conversation was heading but hoping she was wrong. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I need a wife. Temporarily." His words hung in the air between them like a challenge. "Someone who can convince the Yamamotos that I'm capable of commitment and stability. Someone they'll believe genuinely cares about me. But surely you know someone?" Natalie began, thinking of all the elegant women she'd seen him photographed with at charity galas and business events. "No." His answer was immediate and final. "Every woman in my social circle would see this as an opportunity to make the arrangement permanent. They want the Kane name and fortune, not the man behind it. But you..." He studied her again and she felt exposed under his intense gaze. "You've never asked me for anything. Never tried to use your position for personal gain. When your mother needed surgery and you asked for a salary advance, you insisted on a payment plan with interest. Natalie's cheeks heated with embarrassment. She'd hoped he hadn't noticed her financial struggles, but apparently Adrian Kane noticed everything. Mr. Kane, I don't understand what you're asking me to do. I'm asking you to marry me, Natalie? A business arrangement, nothing more. His voice became brisk and professional again, as if he were negotiating any other contract. The ceremony would be private, purely legal. We'd maintain separate lives except for public appearances and the meeting with the Yamamotos. After the deal is secured, we'd divorce quietly. No publicity, no complications. She stared at him in shock, her practical mind immediately jumping to all the reasons this was impossible. I can't. This is crazy. People don't just marry their bosses for business deals. Don't they? He moved closer, and she caught the scent of his expensive cologne mixed with exhaustion and desperation. I've researched you, Natalie. Your mother's cancer treatments cost $40,000 a month. You're working 3 jobs and still falling behind on payments. Your university has put your enrollment on hold until you can pay your outstanding balance. You're drowning financially and I'm offering you a lifeline. The truth of his words hit her like a physical blow. She was drowning, had been for months, watching her mother grow weaker while medical bills piled up like snow in a blizzard. Her pride wanted to reject his proposal immediately, but her love for her mother made her hesitate. How much? She whispered, hating herself for asking but needing to know. $5 million. $2 million up front to handle your mother's treatments and your education. $3 million when the arrangement ends. His offer was delivered without emotion, as if he were discussing stock prices rather than changing her entire life. $5 million. Enough to save her mother, finish school and build a secure future. Enough to stop lying awake at night wondering if she'd lose the most important person in her world because she couldn't afford to save her. I need time to think, Natalie managed, her voice barely audible. Of course. Adrian returned to his desk, suddenly all business again. But I need an answer by tomorrow morning. The legal paperwork will take time to arrange, and the Yamamotos arrive in 4 weeks. As Natalie walked toward the office door on unsteady legs, Adrian's voice stopped her. Natalie? She turned back to see something almost vulnerable in his expression. I want you to know this arrangement would be completely professional. You'd have your own bedroom in my penthouse, your own space and privacy. I would never take advantage of the situation or ask for anything you're not comfortable giving. Something in his tone convinced her he was telling the truth, but it also raised new questions about what kind of man Adrian Kane really was beneath his corporate exterior. As she left his office and tried to return to her normal work routine, one thought kept echoing in her mind. What if accepting his proposal changed them both in ways neither of them expected? The afternoon passed in a blur of phone calls and meetings, but Natalie's mind kept returning to Adrian's shocking proposition. Every time she looked at her phone and saw another message from the hospital about her mother's treatment costs, her resolve weakened a little more. By 5 o'clock, when the office began to empty, she found herself standing outside Adrian's door again, knowing her answer but terrified of the consequences. She knocked softly and entered when he called out. Adrian looked up from his computer, and for a moment she saw exhaustion and vulnerability in his eyes before his professional mask slipped back into place. I'll do it, she said simply, the words falling into the silence between them like stones into still water. I'll marry you. The next morning, Natalie arrived at Kane Industries an hour early, her stomach churning with anxiety and second thoughts. She'd barely slept, alternating between excitement about saving her mother and terror about what she'd agreed to do. The empty office felt different now that everything between her and Adrian had changed, as if the walls themselves knew she was about to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. Adrian's office door was already open when she walked past, and his voice called out before she could reach her desk. Natalie, could you come in here please? She found him impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit, looking nothing like the exhausted man who'd collapsed the day before. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his steel gray eyes alert and focused. Only the slight tension in his jaw revealed any stress about their conversation. I want to make sure you understand exactly what this arrangement involves, he said without preamble, gesturing for her to sit across from his desk. I've had my lawyers draft a preliminary contract, but I wanted to discuss the details with you personally first. Natalie smoothed her simple black dress, the nicest outfit she owned, and tried to look professional rather than terrified. Okay. Adrian opened a leather folder and pulled out several documents. The legal marriage ceremony will take place next Friday at City Hall. Small and private, just 2 witnesses from my legal team. After that, you'll move into the guest suite at my penthouse. It's fully furnished with everything you'll need, including a private entrance if you prefer to come and go without seeing me. The practicality of his tone made the situation feel slightly less overwhelming. This wasn't a romantic fairy tale, it was a business transaction, and Adrian was treating it as such. What about my mother? She'll have questions about why I'm suddenly getting married. We'll need to create a believable backstory, Adrian replied, pulling out a notepad. Something that explains how our relationship developed without raising suspicions. I suggest we say we've been quietly dating for several months, keeping it professional at work but spending time together outside the office. Natalie nodded, though the idea of lying to her mother made her uncomfortable. Eleanor Brooks had raised her daughter to value honesty above all else, and this deception went against everything she'd been taught. She'll want to meet you before the wedding. Of course. I'll take you both to dinner this weekend. We should practice our story beforehand so our details match. Adrian made a note on his pad, treating their fake relationship like any other business project requiring coordination. What about public appearances? Natalie asked, trying to think through all the complications. If people see us together, won't they wonder why you married your assistant? That's actually perfect, Adrian said, and for the first time that morning he almost smiled. Office romances happen all the time, especially between executives and their assistants. People will assume we fell for each other while working closely together. It's believable and romantic enough to satisfy the Yamamotos. The word romantic made Natalie's cheeks heat up, though she wasn't sure why. Nothing about this arrangement was romantic. It was pure business, a solution to both their problems that required them to pretend feelings neither of them had. There will be some social events we'll need to attend together, Adrian continued. Business dinners, charity galas, the kinds of functions where the Yamamotos might expect to see us. I'll arrange for appropriate clothing and accessories. Consider it part of the business expense. I don't need you to buy me clothes, Natalie said quickly, her pride flaring. I can handle that myself. Adrian looked at her patiently. Natalie, the events we'll attend have dress codes that require $1,000 gowns and designer shoes. I'm not trying to insult you, I'm being practical. This arrangement benefits my business, so it's appropriate for me to cover the associated costs. She wanted to argue further, but he was right. Her entire wardrobe probably cost less than a single dress appropriate for his social circle. Fine. But I want it understood that I'm not comfortable with expensive gifts or anything that feels like payment for services. Understood. Adrian made another note, and Natalie wondered if he was relieved by her attitude or disappointed. With his wealth and power, he could probably have any woman he wanted. What must it be like to need someone so ordinary for something so important? What about physical affection? The question slipped out before she could stop it, and immediately she felt mortified. I mean, if we're supposed to be married, won't people expect us to act like we care about each other? Adrian's pen stilled on the paper, and when he looked up, something flickered in his gray eyes that she couldn't identify. We'll need to be comfortable with basic displays of affection. Holding hands, maybe a kiss on the cheek at formal events. Nothing more than that unless you're specifically comfortable with it. Okay, she whispered, though the idea of kissing Adrian Kane, even just on the cheek, made her heart race in a way that had nothing to do with business arrangements. The most important thing is that this feels natural to outside observers, Adrian continued. The Yamamotos are very perceptive people. If they suspect our marriage is purely for business, they'll view it as dishonest and end negotiations immediately. We need to convince them that we genuinely care about each other. Natalie studied his face, trying to understand the man behind the corporate facade. Have you ever been in love, Mr. Kane? Really in love, I mean. The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the desk. Once. A long time ago, before my family died. But love makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability is dangerous in my position. People use your feelings against you, turn your care for others into weapons to manipulate you. There was something deeply sad in his voice that made Natalie's heart ache. Not everyone is like that. In my experience, they are. Adrian closed the folder with their contract details, his professional mask sliding back into place. Which is why this arrangement works perfectly. We both understand it's temporary and based on mutual benefit rather than emotion. No one gets hurt and we both get what we need. But as Natalie returned to her desk to begin her regular work duties, she wondered if Adrian was wrong about that last part. Something told her that pretending to be married to a man like him, even temporarily, was going to be far more complicated than either of them expected. The rest of the week passed in a whirlwind of legal paperwork and wedding preparations. Adrian's efficiency was impressive. Within days he'd arranged everything from the marriage license to a post-wedding dinner with her mother. Natalie found herself swept along in the current of his planning, barely having time to process the magnitude of what she'd agreed to do. On Thursday evening she sat in her small apartment going through her meager wardrobe, trying to find something appropriate for dinner with Adrian and her mother. Everything looked shabby and worn compared to the world she was about to enter. The weight of the deception pressed heavily on her chest. Tomorrow she would marry a man she barely knew, and then spend the next few months pretending to love him. Her phone rang and Adrian's name appeared on the screen. They'd exchanged personal numbers for the first time that week, though their conversations had remained strictly business. "Hello," she answered, surprised by the call. "Natalie, I wanted to make sure you're prepared for tomorrow." His voice sounded different over the phone, warmer somehow, less formal than it was in the office. "I think so. I have something to wear, and I've practiced our story until I could recite it in my sleep." "Good. But that's not what I meant." He paused and she heard the sound of traffic in the background. "Are you sure about this? Really sure? Once we sign those papers tomorrow, there's no going back without significant legal and financial complications." The question surprised her. All week, Adrian had seemed completely confident about their arrangement, treating it like any other business deal. Now, the night before their wedding, he was offering her one last chance to escape. "Are you having second thoughts?" she asked instead of answering. "No. This is the best solution for both of us. But I want to make sure you feel the same way." Natalie closed her eyes, thinking of her mother lying in a hospital bed, growing weaker each day while medical bills piled up around them like vultures. "I'm sure. Tomorrow I marry you and we both get what we need." "Tomorrow you marry me," Adrian repeated, and something in his voice made her wonder if he was trying to convince himself as much as confirm their plan. "Good night, Natalie. Try to get some sleep." After he hung up, Natalie sat in her small living room, staring at the simple gold band Adrian had given her that afternoon. It was elegant but not ostentatious, exactly the kind of ring a practical CEO might choose for a business arrangement. Tomorrow it would make her Mrs. Adrian Kane, at least on paper. She slipped the ring onto her finger, surprised by how perfectly it fit. Adrian had somehow known her ring size without asking, another example of his attention to detail. As she looked at the gold band catching the light from her lamp, Natalie realized that despite all their careful planning and legal contracts, she had no idea what kind of man she was really about to marry. The marriage ceremony at City Hall took exactly 12 minutes. Natalie stood beside Adrian in her simple blue dress, something borrowed from her roommate since she couldn't afford anything new, and repeated vows that felt strange and hollow in her mouth. When the justice of the peace pronounced them husband and wife, Adrian gave her a brief, professional kiss on the lips that somehow felt more intimate than it should have. "Congratulations, Mrs. Kane," he whispered against her ear as they signed the marriage certificate, and hearing her new name made her stomach flutter with nervous energy. 2 hours later, Natalie found herself in Adrian's penthouse for the first time, overwhelmed by the luxury that would be her temporary home. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered breathtaking views of Central Park, while elegant furniture and priceless artwork filled rooms larger than her entire apartment. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and completely intimidating. "Your suite is through here," Adrian said, leading her down a hallway lined with abstract paintings. He opened a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with its own sitting area and bathroom, decorated in soft grays and blues that somehow felt welcoming rather than cold. "It's beautiful," Natalie said honestly, running her fingers along the silk bedding. "I feel like I'm in a hotel. I want you to be comfortable here." Adrian lingered in the doorway, still wearing his wedding suit but with his tie loosened and his hair slightly mussed. For the first time since she'd known him, he seemed uncertain. "There's a fully stocked kitchen, or Mrs. Henderson comes in to cook if you prefer. She's been my housekeeper for 5 years and very discreet." "Thank you." Natalie set her single suitcase on the bed, acutely aware of how little she'd brought to this new life. "When do we have our first public appearance as a married couple?" "Tomorrow night. The Metropolitan Museum is hosting a charity gala for children's cancer research. Several major donors will be there, including some business associates who know the Yamamotos personally." Adrian checked his expensive watch. "A stylist will come by tomorrow afternoon to help you choose appropriate attire." The mention of children's cancer made Natalie think of the pediatric ward where her mother had volunteered before her own diagnosis. "That's a cause I actually care about." Adrian looked surprised. "Really? My mother used to read stories to kids in the cancer ward at Mount Sinai. Before she got sick, she said it helped her appreciate every healthy day she had." Natalie smoothed her wedding dress, still surreal in its significance. It'll be easier to seem genuine about something that actually matters to me. I hadn't thought of that, Adrian admitted. Most of the social events I attend are just networking opportunities disguised as charity. I never considered that you might have personal connections to the causes. There's a lot you don't know about me, Natalie said softly, then immediately worried the comment sounded too personal for their business arrangement. But Adrian didn't seem offended. Instead, he studied her with that intense gray gaze that made her feel exposed and curious at the same time. You're right. Perhaps we should remedy that. The more we know about each other, the more convincing our marriage will be. Like what? Simple things. Your favorite food, how you take your coffee, what you do in your free time. He paused. Things a husband would know about his wife. The word husband sent an unexpected shiver through Natalie. What about you? What should a wife know about Adrian Kane that isn't in Forbes magazine? For a moment, she thought he might deflect the question with another businesslike response. Instead, he surprised her by actually considering it. I hate small talk at parties, but I'm good at it because I have to be. I play piano, though no one knows that. And I haven't celebrated a birthday since my family died because it feels wrong to be happy about getting older when they never got the chance. The vulnerability in his admission caught Natalie off guard. That's incredibly sad, Adrian. He shrugged, his professional mask slipping back into place. It's practical. Grief is a luxury I can't afford. Grief isn't a luxury, Natalie said firmly. It's love with nowhere to go. My father taught me that before he died. Adrian went very still. How old were you when you lost him? 16. Heart attack at work. He was an accountant who stayed late every night trying to provide for us. In some ways, I think work killed him just like it's killing you. I'm not dying, Natalie. Aren't you? She gestured toward the magnificent but cold penthouse around them. When was the last time you did something just because it made you happy? When did you last laugh without it being for business purposes? Adrian was quiet for so long that Natalie worried she'd overstepped. Then he said, I should let you get settled in. Tomorrow will be a long day. As he turned to leave, Natalie found herself calling out, Adrian? He paused in the doorway. Thank you. For helping my mother, for giving me this opportunity. I know you could have chosen anyone. No, he said quietly. I couldn't have chosen anyone else. You're the only person I trust not to hurt me for personal gain. After he left, Natalie sat on her new bed in her beautiful new room, trying to process everything that had happened. She was married to Adrian Kane, one of the most powerful men in New York, yet she'd never felt more uncertain about anything in her life. The conversation they just shared felt more intimate than their wedding ceremony, and she was beginning to realize that the biggest danger in this arrangement wasn't failing to convince the Yamamotos they were in love. The biggest danger was that it might stop feeling like pretending. The next evening, Natalie stood before a full-length mirror in a midnight blue gown that cost more than she'd earned in 3 months at her previous job. The stylist Adrian had hired, an elegant woman named Patricia, had transformed her into someone she barely recognized. Her natural hair had been styled into an upswept, elegant look, her makeup was flawless, and diamond earrings borrowed from Adrian's mother's collection sparkled at her ears. You look stunning, Patricia said with professional satisfaction. Mr. Kane won't be able to take his eyes off you. The comment made Natalie's stomach flutter nervously. She'd been so focused on convincing strangers they were in love that she hadn't considered how Adrian might react to seeing her dressed up. Their relationship had been strictly professional for 6 months, and now she was supposed to be his wife. A knock at her bedroom door made her heart skip. Come in, she called, turning from the mirror. Adrian stepped inside and stopped immediately, his gray eyes widening as he took in her appearance. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. He looked devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, but it was the expression on his face that made Natalie's breath catch. He was looking at her like he'd never seen her before. You're beautiful, he said finally, his voice rougher than usual. Thank you, Natalie whispered, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Patricia worked magic. No, Adrian said, moving closer. Patricia just helped everyone else see what I should have noticed before. You've always been beautiful, Natalie. I was just too blind to see it. The sincerity in his voice made her heart race. This was supposed to be pretending, wasn't it? A business arrangement with no real feelings involved? But the way Adrian was looking at her felt far too real to be performance. We should go, she managed, needing to escape the intensity of the moment. We don't want to be late for our first appearance as husband and wife. Adrian offered her his arm, and as they walked toward the elevator, Natalie caught their reflection in the mirrored walls. They looked like a real couple, elegant, well-matched, genuinely comfortable with each other. The image was so convincing that for a moment she almost believed it herself. "Remember," Adrian said as the elevator descended toward their waiting car, "tonight we're newlyweds who can't keep our hands off each other. The story is that we've been secretly dating for months and eloped because we couldn't wait any longer to be married." "Got it," Natalie replied, trying to ignore how the idea of not being able to keep her hands off Adrian was becoming less of an acting challenge and more of a genuine struggle. The charity gala was everything Natalie had expected and more. The Metropolitan Museum had been transformed into a glittering wonderland, with New York's elite mingling among priceless artifacts while a string quartet played in the background. She'd never been to anything so elegant, and despite her beautiful gown, she felt like an imposter. "Breathe," Adrian murmured in her ear as they entered the main hall. "You belong here just as much as anyone else." His confidence in her was reassuring, and when he placed his hand on the small of her back to guide her through the crowd, the gesture felt protective rather than possessive. Several people approached them throughout the evening, and Natalie was surprised by how natural it felt to stand beside Adrian, accepting congratulations on their recent marriage and deflecting questions about their honeymoon plans. "You're a natural at this," Adrian whispered during a brief moment alone. "I'm impressed by how comfortable you seem." "I'm terrified," Natalie admitted. "But your hand on my back makes me feel safer." Adrian's fingers pressed slightly more firmly against her spine. "Good. That's exactly how a new husband should make his wife feel." But as the words left his mouth, Natalie wondered if he was still talking about their business arrangement or something more real. The line between performance and genuine emotion was becoming blurrier with each passing hour. When the evening speeches began, Adrian led her to a table near the front, keeping his arm around her chair in a gesture that seemed both natural and intimate. The speaker was talking about the importance of family support in fighting childhood cancer, and Natalie found herself genuinely moved by the stories of brave children and devoted parents. "This matters to you," Adrian observed quietly, noticing the tears in her eyes. "Children shouldn't have to fight for their lives," she whispered back. "They should be worrying about homework and crushes, not chemotherapy and surgery." Adrian was quiet for a moment, studying her face in the dim light. "You have such a good heart, Natalie. I'd forgotten what that looks like." Before she could respond, he leaned over and kissed her temple softly, the gesture so tender and unexpected that she felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. This was supposed to be an act for their audience, but the way Adrian's lips lingered against her skin felt far too genuine to be performance. As the evening continued, Natalie found herself falling into the role of Adrian's wife with alarming ease. When he introduced her to business associates, she felt proud to be beside him. When he held her hand during dinner, she didn't want him to let go. And when they danced together for the first time, moving slowly to a romantic ballad while other couples swayed around them, she realized that somewhere between their City Hall wedding and this glittering ballroom, something fundamental had shifted between them. "What are you thinking about?" Adrian asked as they danced, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "How different this feels than I expected," she answered honestly. "Different how?" Natalie looked up into his gray eyes, seeing warmth there that hadn't existed a week ago. "Less like acting and more like..." She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "More like what we both might want if circumstances were different?" Adrian suggested gently. The question hung between them as they continued to move together, and Natalie realized that the most dangerous part of their arrangement wasn't fooling other people into believing they were in love. The most dangerous part was how easy it was becoming to fool themselves. 3 weeks into their marriage, Natalie was beginning to understand the rhythm of being Adrian's wife, even if she still felt like she was playing a role that didn't quite fit. Their days followed a careful pattern: professional interaction at the office, polite conversation over dinner, and separate bedrooms that maintained the boundaries of their business arrangement. Yet something was shifting between them, small moments of genuine connection that felt less like performance and more like discovery. On a rainy Thursday morning, Natalie arrived at the office to find Adrian already at his desk, but something was different. He was sitting completely still, staring at a letter in his hands with an expression she'd never seen before: vulnerable and lost, like a child who'd been hurt and didn't understand why. "Adrian?" She approached his desk cautiously. "Is everything all right?" He looked up at her, and she was startled to see moisture in his gray eyes. "It's the anniversary," he said quietly. 10 years today since the accident that killed my family." Natalie felt her heart clench with sympathy. In all their conversations about their fake relationship and business arrangements, Adrian had never spoken in detail about losing his parents and sister. She'd known it was the defining tragedy of his life, but seeing him this broken made it real in a way that statistics and business articles never could. "I'm so sorry," she said, moving around the desk to stand beside his chair. "Do you want to talk about it?" "There's nothing to say." They were driving to my college graduation ceremony when a drunk driver ran a red light. His voice was flat, emotionless, as if he'd practiced telling this story until it lost all meaning. "I waited at the auditorium for 3 hours before someone thought to call me." Without thinking, Natalie reached out and covered his hand with hers. His fingers were cold despite the warm office, and she could feel the slight tremor running through them. "You don't have to be strong all the time, you know. Not with me." Adrian stared down at their joined hands, and for a moment she thought he might pull away. Instead, he turned his palm up and laced their fingers together, holding on like she was an anchor in rough waters. "I usually spend this day working until I collapse," he admitted. "It's easier than remembering." "What if we did something different this year?" Natalie suggested gently. "Something to honor their memory instead of running from it?" Adrian looked at her with surprise. "Like what? Tell me about them. Not how they died but how they lived. What made them laugh, what they dreamed about, what they would want for you now." For the next hour, Adrian talked about his family in a way Natalie had never heard him speak about anything. His voice grew warm, describing his younger sister Isabella's dream of becoming a veterinarian, how she'd rescued every stray animal in their neighborhood. He smiled, talking about his mother's terrible cooking and his father's patient attempts to teach him to play chess. They sounded like a loving, normal family whose greatest tragedy was being taken too soon. "Isabella would have liked you," Adrian said finally. "She always said I needed someone who wasn't afraid to tell me when I was being an idiot." "Smart girl," Natalie replied, earning a genuine laugh from Adrian that transformed his entire face. "My mother would have loved planning our wedding," he continued, then caught himself. "I mean, if we were real?" Natalie finished softly. The word hung between them, carrying more weight than either wanted to acknowledge. Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. "Yes, real." That afternoon, instead of their usual separate lunch breaks, Adrian surprised Natalie by suggesting they visit the children's cancer ward at Mount Sinai, the same hospital where her mother was being treated. He'd arranged for Kane Industries to deliver toys and books to the young patients, but more importantly, he wanted to spend time with the children himself. Natalie watched in amazement as Adrian's corporate facade completely disappeared around the sick children. He sat on the floor to play board games with a 7-year-old named Tommy, read stories in funny voices to a group of giggling patients, and listened with genuine interest as teenagers told him about their dreams for the future. The transformation was remarkable. This was the man he'd been before grief and responsibility built walls around his heart. "Mr. Kane," asked a 10-year-old girl named Sophie, who was between chemotherapy treatments, "is that lady your girlfriend?" Adrian glanced at Natalie, who was helping a young boy with a puzzle, then back at Sophie. "She's my wife, actually." "She's really pretty," Sophie said approvingly. "And she's nice. I can tell because she listens when people talk to her, really listens. My mom says that's how you know someone has a good heart." "Your mom is very wise," Adrian replied, his gaze still on Natalie. "And you're right about her heart." When they finally left the hospital that evening, Adrian was quieter than usual, but it was a thoughtful silence rather than his typical emotional withdrawal. As they rode the elevator up to his penthouse, he suddenly spoke. "Thank you for today. For suggesting we do something meaningful instead of just surviving the anniversary." "Thank you for letting me see who you really are," Natalie replied. "Those children adore you. You should do more things like this." "Maybe I will." Adrian paused as the elevator opened to his floor. "Would you like to have dinner together tonight? Not for practice or appearances, just because I'd enjoy your company." Something warm bloomed in Natalie's chest. "I'd like that very much." They ordered Chinese takeout and ate sitting on the floor of Adrian's living room, something he claimed he'd never done before. The conversation flowed easily, covering everything from their childhood dreams to their opinions on movies and books. Natalie discovered that Adrian had a sharp sense of humor beneath his serious exterior, while he seemed fascinated by her stories of growing up with limited resources but unlimited love from her mother. "I can't imagine what that's like," Adrian said when Natalie described how her mother had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat after her father's death, never once complaining or making Natalie feel guilty about their struggles. "Having someone love you unconditionally like that." "Your parents loved you that way," Natalie reminded him gently. "Yes, but I was young when I lost them. I never got to experience that kind of love as an adult, never learned how to give it back. Adrian looked down at his hands, vulnerability creeping into his voice again. Sometimes I wonder if I'm even capable of it anymore. You are, Natalie said with certainty. I saw you with those children today. The love you gave them was real and beautiful. That's different. Children are innocent, uncomplicated. They don't want anything from me except attention and kindness. What makes you think adults are so different? Natalie asked. Most people just want to be seen and valued for who they are, not what they can provide. Adrian looked at her intently. Is that what you want, Natalie? To be seen and valued? The question felt loaded with meaning beyond their business arrangement. Everyone wants that, she said carefully. Even from me? There was something almost hopeful in his voice that made Natalie's heart race. They were venturing into dangerous territory, acknowledging feelings that had no place in their temporary marriage. But sitting there on his expensive carpet eating takeout and talking like real partners, it was impossible to pretend this was purely business anymore. Especially from you, she admitted quietly. Adrian moved closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his gray eyes, smell the subtle scent of his cologne mixed with something uniquely him. Natalie, I need to tell you something. What? This arrangement we made, it's becoming something I never expected. Something I never thought I wanted. His voice was low, uncertain. You make me remember what it feels like to be human instead of just a business machine. Natalie's breath caught. Adrian? I know this complicates everything, he continued, his hand reaching up to gently cup her cheek. I know we agreed this was temporary, professional. But I can't keep pretending that having you in my life, in my home, doesn't affect me. The touch of his palm against her skin sent warmth spreading through her entire body. This was the moment when she should pull back, remind them both of the boundaries they'd established, protect her heart from getting too invested in something that was supposed to end. Instead, she leaned into his touch. It affects me too, she whispered. Adrian's thumb traced gently across her cheekbone. What are we doing, Natalie? I don't know, she answered honestly. But I know I don't want you to stop touching me. For a long moment they stayed frozen like that, balanced on the edge of crossing a line that would change everything between them. Then Adrian leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, until his forehead rested against hers. This wasn't part of the plan, he murmured. The best things never are, Natalie replied, then closed the distance between them and kissed him. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if they were both testing whether this new intimacy between them was real or just another performance. But when Adrian's arms came around her, pulling her closer, and when Natalie's hands fisted in his shirt, anchoring herself to him, there was nothing fake about the emotion flowing between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Adrian rested his forehead against hers again. I should probably apologize for that. Please don't, Natalie said quickly. Don't make this into something you regret. I could never regret kissing you, Adrian said with such sincerity that it made her heart ache. But I don't want to take advantage of our situation or make you feel pressured. You're not taking advantage of anything, Natalie assured him. I wanted you to kiss me. I've wanted it for weeks. Adrian pulled back to look at her, searching her face for any sign of uncertainty or obligation. Whatever he saw there must have satisfied him, because he smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes and transformed his entire face. In that case, he said, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, would it be terribly unprofessional of me to say that I'm falling for my fake wife? Natalie laughed, the sound bright and happy in the quiet penthouse. Only if it's unprofessional of me to admit I'm falling for my fake husband. They spent the rest of the evening curled up together on the couch, talking and kissing and discovering this new dimension of their relationship. When Natalie finally returned to her own bedroom that night, she lay awake for hours thinking about how dramatically her life had changed. She'd agreed to a business arrangement that was supposed to save her mother and pay for her education. She'd never expected to find herself genuinely falling in love with Adrian Kane. The next morning brought a return to their professional routine, but everything felt different now. Adrian's smiles were warmer, his glances more lingering. When he handed her files or coffee, their fingers would brush and linger just a moment longer than necessary. To outside observers, they probably looked like newlyweds still in the honeymoon phase, which was perfect for their public image. But privately, Natalie was beginning to understand that what was happening between them went far beyond any performance they'd planned. She was seeing sides of Adrian that she suspected very few people ever witnessed, his kindness, his vulnerability, his capacity for deep feeling that he'd buried under years of professional necessity. The question that kept her awake at night was simple but terrifying. What would happen when the Yamamoto deal was completed and their arrangement was supposed to end? Would Adrian want to make their marriage real, or would he retreat back into his safe, controlled world where emotions were liabilities and love was a weakness he couldn't afford? As Natalie watched him work that morning, completely absorbed in a conference call but catching her eye and smiling whenever he noticed her looking, she realized that somewhere along the way, she'd stopped thinking about their relationship as temporary. In her heart, Adrian Kane had become her real husband, and the thought of losing him when their business was concluded was more terrifying than any financial crisis she'd ever faced. The only question now was whether he felt the same way, or if she was setting herself up for the kind of heartbreak that could destroy her completely. The call came on a Tuesday morning while Natalie was reviewing Adrian's schedule for the week. She watched him transform from the warm, affectionate man she'd been getting to know into the sharp, focused CEO as he listened to his assistant announce that the Yamamoto family had moved up their arrival date. "They'll be here Friday instead of next week," Adrian said after hanging up, running a hand through his dark hair. "Apparently they want to conclude business quickly and return to Tokyo for a family wedding." Natalie felt her stomach drop. They'd been married for almost a month, and while their relationship had grown genuine and deep, she still felt nervous about the most crucial test of their performance. "Are you ready?" "The question is whether we're ready," Adrian corrected, moving around his desk to stand in front of her. Even in the office, his demeanor toward her had softened considerably since their first kiss. The Yamamotos will expect to see a couple deeply in love, completely committed to each other. "Can you do that?" "Can you?" she challenged back, surprised by her own boldness. Adrian's gray eyes grew intense as he studied her face. "That's the problem, Natalie. I'm not sure I'll be acting anymore." The admission sent warmth flooding through her chest. Over the past weeks, their relationship had evolved far beyond their business arrangement. They shared meals, long conversations, and increasingly intimate moments that had nothing to do with public appearances. Last night, Adrian had fallen asleep on the couch with his head in her lap while she read to him, a level of vulnerability and trust that felt more real than any contract they'd signed. "Maybe that's good," Natalie said quietly. "Maybe being genuine is exactly what we need." "Or maybe it's the most dangerous thing we could do," Adrian replied, but his hand reached out to touch her cheek in a gesture that had become natural between them. "What happens after Friday, Natalie? When the deal is signed and we don't need to pretend anymore?" It was the question they'd both been avoiding, even as their feelings grew stronger each day. Their arrangement had a clear endpoint, but their emotions had developed their own timeline that didn't match their legal contracts. "I don't know," she admitted. "Do you want there to be an after?" Before Adrian could answer, his secretary's voice came through the intercom announcing his next meeting. The moment was broken, but the question hung between them as they returned to their professional roles. That evening, Adrian took Natalie to dinner at an elegant Japanese restaurant to prepare for meeting the Yamamotos. He'd studied their culture and customs extensively, wanting to show proper respect for their traditional values. "Mr. Yamamoto built his empire from a small family business," Adrian explained over sushi. "His son Kenji will be handling most of the negotiations, but the father's approval is essential. They value loyalty, honor, and family stability above profit margins." "No pressure then," Natalie said with nervous humor. "You'll be fine," Adrian assured her, his hand covering hers across the table. "Just be yourself. Your genuine nature is exactly what they'll respond to. What if they ask difficult questions about our relationship? About why we married so quickly or when we plan to have children?" Adrian's fingers tightened around hers. "We tell them the truth, that we fell in love quickly and completely, and we couldn't wait to build a life together. As for children..." He paused, something flickering in his expression. "We tell them we're excited about that possibility in the future." The way he said it, with such conviction and warmth, made Natalie's heart skip. Were they still talking about their performance, or was Adrian imagining a real future together? "Adrian," she said carefully, "when you think about the future, what do you see?" He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "Honestly, for the first time in 10 years, I see something other than just work and responsibility. I see mornings with someone who makes coffee exactly the way I like it without being asked. I see coming home to someone who asks about my day because she genuinely cares about the answer. I see." He looked directly into her eyes. "I see you, Natalie. In every future I allow myself to imagine." The sincerity in his voice took her breath away. "Even after the business deal is done?" "Especially then," Adrian said firmly. "Whatever happens with the Yamamotos, I don't want this to end. I don't want us to end." Before Natalie could respond, her phone buzzed with a call from Mount Sinai Hospital. Her mother's doctor rarely called in the evening unless something was wrong, and fear immediately gripped her heart. "I have to take this," she said apologetically, stepping away from the table. The conversation was brief but devastating. Her mother's latest test results showed that the cancer had spread more aggressively than expected. They needed to start a new, more intensive treatment immediately, treatment that would cost an additional $50,000 up front. Natalie returned to the table feeling shaky and overwhelmed. The money from her arrangement with Adrian had covered her mother's previous treatments, but this new development threatened to derail everything. "What's wrong?" Adrian asked immediately, seeing her distress. "My mother's cancer has gotten worse. They need to start a different treatment protocol, but it costs more than what we planned for." Tears threatened to spill from her eyes. "I don't know what to do. The insurance won't cover experimental treatments, and I can't ask you for more money when you've already been so generous." "Yes, you can," Adrian said without hesitation. "Of course you can. Whatever she needs, we'll handle it." "Adrian, it's $50,000 on top of everything else. That's not part of our agreement." "Forget our agreement," he said firmly, reaching across to take both her hands. "You're my wife, Natalie. In every way that matters, you're my wife. And that means your family is my family. We take care of each other." The tears Natalie had been holding back finally spilled over. "Why are you being so good to me?" "Because I love you," Adrian said simply, as if the words were the most natural thing in the world. "I love you, and I love your mother because she raised the extraordinary woman I fell in love with." It was the first time either of them had said those words, and hearing them in Adrian's voice, strong and certain and completely genuine, made Natalie's world shift on its axis. "I love you too," she whispered, hardly believing she was saying it. "I love you so much it scares me." Adrian stood and came around the table, pulling her into his arms right there in the middle of the restaurant. "Don't be scared," he murmured against her hair. "We're going to figure this out together. All of it, your mother's treatment, the Yamamoto deal, our future. Together." As they held each other, Natalie realized that what had started as a desperate business arrangement had become something neither of them had expected. Real love, the kind that changed everything and made them both braver than they'd ever been alone. Friday arrived with unseasonably warm weather and clear skies, which Adrian took as a good omen. The Yamamoto family was scheduled to arrive at his office at 2 o'clock for initial introductions, followed by dinner at his penthouse that evening where they would meet Natalie as his wife. Natalie spent the morning at the hospital with her mother, who was beginning the new treatment protocol. Eleanor Brooks looked frail but determined, and her eyes sparkled with curiosity about her daughter's sudden marriage. "This Adrian of yours," Eleanor said as nurses prepared her for, "you really love him, don't you?" "How can you tell?" Natalie asked, adjusting her mother's blanket. "Because you have the same glow I had when I fell in love with your father. Like you've discovered a secret that makes the whole world more beautiful." Eleanor squeezed her daughter's hand weakly. "I was worried this marriage happened too fast, but seeing you now, I think you found something real." "I think I did too, Mom." "Then don't let fear mess it up," Eleanor advised. "Love like that doesn't come around often. When it does, you fight for it." By 6 o'clock that evening, Natalie was dressed in an elegant navy dress that Adrian had chosen because he said it brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. She'd spent an hour on her hair and makeup, wanting to make the perfect impression on the people who would determine not just Adrian's business future, but potentially their personal future as well. The Yamamoto family arrived precisely on time. Hiroshi Yamamoto, the dignified patriarch in his 70s. His son Kenji, a sharp-eyed businessman in his 40s, and Kenji's wife Akiko, a gracious woman who immediately put Natalie at ease with her warm smile. "Mr. Kane," Hiroshi said with a formal bow, "thank you for welcoming us into your home. This is a great honor." "The honor is mine," Adrian replied, bowing respectfully in return. "Please, allow me to introduce my wife, Natalie." As Natalie stepped forward to greet their guests, she felt Adrian's hand settle protectively on her lower back, a gesture that had become so natural between them that she knew it wasn't for show. This was simply how Adrian touched her now, like he needed the connection as much as she did. "Mrs. Kane," Hiroshi said warmly, "your husband speaks of you with great affection. It is clear you bring much happiness to his life." "He brings happiness to mine as well," Natalie replied honestly. "I feel very fortunate." Throughout dinner, the conversation flowed easily between business topics and personal stories. The Yamamotos were particularly interested in how she and Adrian had met and fallen in love, and Natalie found that telling their story, with some creative editing around the business arrangement, felt natural and true. You worked for your husband before you married? Akiko asked with interest. That must have made the courtship complicated. We tried to keep things professional, Natalie said, glancing at Adrian with genuine affection. But it became impossible to ignore our feelings. Adrian was so kind when my mother became ill, so supportive and caring. I realized I was falling in love with a man who was much more than just my boss. And I realized I was falling for a woman who saw past my title and reputation to the person I really am, Adrian added, his hand finding hers across the table. Natalie makes me want to be a better man. Hiroshi observed their interaction with sharp but approving eyes. In our culture, we believe that a person's character is revealed through their choice of spouse. You have chosen well, both of you. As the evening progressed, it became clear that the Yamamotos were impressed not just with Adrian's business acumen, but with the stability and genuine affection they witnessed between him and Natalie. When Kenji began discussing specific contract terms, his tone was positive and collaborative rather than skeptical. We believe Kane Industries will be an excellent partner for our expansion into American markets, Kenji said as they moved to Adrian's study for final negotiations. Your commitment to family values aligns well with our corporate philosophy. Family has become much more important to me recently, Adrian replied, his eyes finding Natalie across the room. My wife has taught me that success means nothing without people you love to share it with. 2 hours later, as the Yamamoto family prepared to leave, contracts were signed and hands were shaken. The $3 billion deal was officially complete, and Kane Industries had secured the partnership that would transform Adrian's company into a global powerhouse. Thank you both for a lovely evening, Hiroshi said as they waited for their car. It has been a pleasure to meet such a devoted couple. Your marriage gives us great confidence in our business partnership. After their guests departed, Adrian and Natalie stood in the quiet of his penthouse, the weight of what had just happened settling around them. They had succeeded beyond their wildest expectations, but now they faced the question that had been haunting them for weeks. What came next? We did it, Natalie said finally. The deal is done. Yes, Adrian agreed, but his tone was cautious rather than celebratory. So what happens now? The question hung in the air between them, carrying all the uncertainty and hope and fear they'd been avoiding. Adrian turned to face her fully, his gray eyes intense and sincere. Now we decide if we want to keep being married for real, or if this was just the most elaborate business arrangement in corporate history. Natalie felt her heart hammering against her ribs. Everything they'd built together, the trust, the intimacy, the love they'd both acknowledged, had led to this moment of choice. What do you want, Adrian? She asked quietly. I want you to stay, he said without hesitation. Not because of any contract or business need, but because I can't imagine my life without you in it anymore. I want to wake up beside you every morning and come home to you every evening. I want to build something real and lasting with you. Even though I'm not from your world? Even though I can't give you the kind of sophisticated social connections that someone in your position usually marries? Adrian stepped closer, cupping her face in his hands. You give me something infinitely more valuable than social connections, Natalie. You give me yourself. Your kindness, your strength, your beautiful heart that sees good in everyone. You make me feel human again. I want to stay too, she whispered, leaning into his touch. I want this to be real. Then it's real, Adrian said, leaning down to kiss her with a passion and tenderness that sealed their decision. No more contracts, no more fake timelines. Just us, choosing each other every day for the rest of our lives. As they held each other in the quiet of their home, Natalie marveled at how a desperate financial arrangement had led her to the greatest love of her life. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and decisions, but tonight she was exactly where she belonged, in the arms of the man who had started as her employer, become her fake husband, and ended up being her soulmate. The morning after the Yamamoto celebration brought an unexpected phone call that would test everything Adrian and Natalie had built together. Natalie was making breakfast in Adrian's spacious kitchen, humming softly as she moved around the space that was finally starting to feel like home, when Adrian's phone rang with a call from his head of security. We have a problem, the gruff voice said without preamble. Someone's been digging into your personal life, specifically your marriage. A private investigator has been asking questions about Mrs. Kane's background, your relationship timeline, the circumstances of your wedding. Adrian's jaw tightened as he listened, his free hand instinctively reaching out to touch Natalie's arm. Who hired the investigator? Still working on that, but based on the questions being asked, someone suspects your marriage isn't what it appears to be. They're specifically looking for evidence that it was arranged for business purposes. After hanging up, Adrian was quiet for several long moments, staring out at the Manhattan skyline with an expression Natalie had learned to recognize as his problem-solving mode. But beneath the business focus she could see worry and something that looked like fear. "Who would want to investigate us?" Natalie asked, setting down her coffee cup with hands that trembled slightly. "Several people, unfortunately. Business rivals who want to discredit me, competitors for the Yamamoto deal who might challenge the contracts if they can prove fraud, or—" Adrian paused, his expression growing darker. "Victoria Chin." Natalie recognized the name immediately. Victoria Chin was Adrian's former business partner and, according to office gossip, his former lover. Their company had split 3 years ago in a bitter dispute that left Victoria with half their shared assets and a burning desire for revenge against the man who had chosen business over their relationship. "You think she's behind this?" "Victoria has the resources and the motivation," Adrian said grimly. "She's also one of the few people who knows me well enough to suspect I might enter a marriage of convenience if it served my business interests." The irony of the situation wasn't lost on either of them. Their marriage had indeed begun as a business arrangement, exactly what Victoria suspected. But it had evolved into something real, something that had nothing to do with contracts or corporate strategy. The problem was proving that to people who were determined to see only the worst in Adrian's motivations. "What do we do?" Natalie asked, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "We prepare for battle," Adrian said, his CEO persona sliding into place. "If Victoria wants to challenge our marriage, she'll need evidence. We need to make sure our story is airtight and that everyone who might be questioned gives consistent accounts of our relationship." Over the next few days, Adrian's legal team worked around the clock to identify potential weaknesses in their public narrative. They discovered that the private investigator had spoken to several Kane Industries employees, asking about Adrian and Natalie's interactions at work and the timeline of their romance. "The good news is that most people bought our story completely," Adrian's lawyer, James Peterson, reported during a conference call. "Your colleagues genuinely believe you fell in love naturally. The bad news is that a few people noted how suddenly your demeanor toward each other changed, particularly how quickly Mrs. Kane went from being a professional assistant to being comfortable with physical affection." "People fall in love quickly sometimes," Natalie protested. "That's not evidence of fraud." "It's not proof," James agreed, "but it could raise questions if presented alongside other suspicious timing, like the fact that your wedding occurred just weeks before the Yamamoto negotiations began." That evening, as they sat in Adrian's study reviewing legal documents and preparing responses to potential accusations, Natalie found herself wondering if their happiness had been too good to last. The weight of maintaining their deception, even though their feelings had become genuine, was exhausting. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly as Adrian poured them both glasses of wine. "What if we can't convince people that what we have is real?" "What we have is real," Adrian said firmly, sitting beside her on the leather sofa. "That's what matters. Whatever Victoria is planning, whatever accusations she makes, the truth is that I love you and you love me. Everything else is just legal technicalities. But if she can prove our marriage started as a business arrangement, then we deal with the consequences together," Adrian interrupted, taking her hand. "Natalie, I need you to understand something. Even if Victoria succeeds in challenging our marriage, even if there are legal complications or business ramifications, I don't regret a single moment of being with you. You've given me the best weeks of my life." His words were comforting, but Natalie couldn't shake the feeling that their perfect bubble was about to burst. The next morning brought confirmation of her fears when Victoria Chin herself requested a meeting with Adrian. "She wants to discuss a mutually beneficial business proposition," Adrian told Natalie after receiving the call. "Which, knowing Victoria, means she wants to blackmail me." They met Victoria that afternoon at an upscale restaurant in Midtown, chosen for its public setting and discreet corners where private conversations could be held. Natalie had seen photos of Victoria in business magazines, but meeting her in person was still intimidating. She was stunningly beautiful in a sharp, polished way, with perfectly styled black hair, designer clothes, and an air of confidence that came from wielding significant power in the corporate world. "Adrian," Victoria greeted him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You look well. Marriage suits you." Her gaze shifted to Natalie, appraising and cold. "And you must be the lovely Mrs. Kane. I've heard so much about you." "All good things, I hope," Natalie replied, matching Victoria's polite but distant tone. "Oh, absolutely fascinating things," Victoria said, settling into her chair with the grace of a predator. "Such a romantic story how you two fell in love so quickly. Almost like a fairy tale." Adrian's hand found Natalie's under the table, squeezing gently in a gesture of support. What do you want, Victoria? Straight to business as always, Victoria laughed, but the sound was brittle. I want to propose a partnership, actually. Your recent success with the Yamamoto deal has opened some interesting opportunities in the Asian markets. I think Chin Industries and Kane Industries could benefit from working together again. We've been down that road before, Adrian said coolly. It didn't end well for either of us. True, but we're both older and wiser now. And I'm sure your new wife would appreciate the financial benefits of such a partnership. Victoria's smile turned sharp as she looked directly at Natalie. After all, medical expenses can be so burdensome, especially for exotic treatments that insurance doesn't cover. The comment was clearly a threat, showing that Victoria knew about Natalie's mother's situation and was prepared to use it as leverage. Natalie felt her cheeks burn with anger, but Adrian's grip on her hand kept her steady. Get to the point, Adrian said, his voice dangerously quiet. The point is that I've done some research into your recent marriage, and I've discovered some very interesting inconsistencies in your timeline. Financial records that suggest Mrs. Kane's circumstances improved dramatically right around the time you two supposedly fell in love. Employment records that show no indication of a romantic relationship until very suddenly, just weeks before the Yamamoto deal. Victoria paused to sip her wine, enjoying the tension she'd created. Now, I'm not saying there's anything improper about your arrangement, but if someone were to examine the evidence with a suspicious mind, they might conclude that your marriage was designed to present a stable family image to traditional business partners. And if the Yamamotos were to learn that their careful evaluation of your character was based on a performance. What do you want? Adrian repeated, his jaw clenched. A partnership agreement. 50-50 split on all Asian market ventures. In exchange, my research into your marriage disappears, and no unfortunate revelations reach the Yamamoto family or the business press. The restaurant seemed to fade away around them as the full scope of Victoria's blackmail became clear. She wasn't just threatening their personal happiness, she was threatening to destroy Adrian's reputation, his business relationships, and potentially his entire career. And if we refuse? Natalie asked, surprised by her own boldness. Victoria's smile became genuinely predatory. Then I'll present my evidence to the Yamamoto family personally. I think they'd be very interested to learn that the stable family man they trusted was actually manipulating their traditional values to secure a business deal. The scandal would be quite damaging to Kane Industries' reputation. After Victoria left, Adrian and Natalie sat in stunned silence, the weight of the threat settling around them like fog. Everything they'd worked for, everything they'd built together, was suddenly at risk because of decisions they'd made before they knew they would fall in love. I won't let her do this to us, Adrian said finally, his voice filled with determination. There has to be another way. What if we just tell the truth? Natalie suggested. Explain to the Yamamotos that our marriage did begin as a business arrangement, but that we fell in love for real? They'd never believe us, Adrian replied sadly. In their minds we would have deceived them, and deception is unforgivable. They'd withdraw from all business relationships immediately. That night, as they lay in bed together, they had started sharing Adrian's master bedroom after their first declaration of love. Natalie stared at the ceiling and tried to find a solution that didn't exist. Maybe I should just disappear, she said quietly into the darkness. If I'm not in the picture, Victoria loses her leverage. Adrian's arms tightened around her immediately. Absolutely not. I'm not losing you because of Victoria's games. But if staying together destroys everything you've worked for, then we'll build something new together, Adrian said firmly. I spent 10 years building an empire because I had nothing else, no one else to care about. But you've shown me what actually matters, Natalie. I'd rather lose everything and have you than keep everything and lose you. His words were beautiful and romantic, but Natalie couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to lose everything they'd worked for. As she fell into a restless sleep in Adrian's arms, she made a decision that would either save their future or destroy it completely. The next morning, while Adrian was in an emergency meeting with his legal team, Natalie made a phone call that would change everything. Mrs. Chin? This is Natalie Kane. I'd like to meet with you privately. Victoria Chin looked genuinely surprised when Natalie walked into the elegant coffee shop in Soho where they'd agreed to meet. She'd probably expected Adrian to come himself, or at least to accompany his wife to what was essentially a negotiation for their future. Mrs. Kane, Victoria said, rising from her corner table with that same predatory smile. How unexpected. Does your husband know you're here? No, Natalie admitted, settling into the chair across from her. This conversation is between you and me. Interesting. Victoria studied Natalie with sharp, calculating eyes. I have to admit, I'm curious about what the little assistant-turned-trophy wife could possibly say to change my mind. The insult stung, but Natalie had expected as much. She'd spent the morning preparing for this conversation, knowing it might be her only chance to protect Adrian from Victoria's threats. I want to understand what you really want, Natalie said calmly. Because I don't think this is actually about business partnerships or money. Victoria's perfectly composed expression flickered slightly. I'm not sure what you mean. You loved him, Natalie said simply. You and Adrian were more than business partners, and when he chose his career over your relationship, it broke your heart. Now you're watching him with me, seeing him happy in a way he never was with you, and it's eating you alive. For a moment, Victoria's mask slipped completely, revealing raw pain and anger underneath her polished exterior. You don't know what you're talking about. I know that Adrian told me about your history, Natalie continued gently. How you built Shinkane Industries together, how you believed you were building a life together too. But after his family died, he became someone who couldn't let anyone get close enough to hurt him again. He threw away everything we had built for some misguided sense of independence, Victoria said, her voice sharp with old hurt. I loved him, and he treated our relationship like it was just another business transaction to be dissolved when it became inconvenient. And now you think he's doing the same thing with me? Natalie said, understanding flooding through her. You think our marriage is just another calculated business move, and you want to prove that Adrian Kane is incapable of real love. Victoria was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. Aren't you? At first, yes, Natalie admitted, the truth feeling strange on her tongue. Our marriage did begin as a business arrangement. Adrian needed to appear stable and family-oriented for the Yamamoto deal, and I needed money for my mother's medical treatments. Victoria's eyes lit up with triumph. So I was right. You're willing to admit it? I'm willing to admit how it started, Natalie corrected. But I'm also willing to tell you how it changed. Would you like to hear about the night Adrian told me about losing his family? How he held my hand and cried for the first time in 10 years? Or about the morning he woke up sick with food poisoning and let me take care of him instead of insisting he was fine? Victoria's expression grew uncertain as Natalie continued. Would you like to hear about how he sits on the floor of children's cancer wards reading stories, not for publicity but because those kids remind him of his sister? Or how he learned to make my mother's favorite tea so she'd feel comfortable when she visits our home? Anyone can fake kindness for a few months, Victoria said, but her voice lacked its earlier conviction. Can they fake the way he looks at me when he thinks no one is watching? Natalie asked softly. Can they fake falling asleep holding someone because they're afraid of waking up alone? Can they fake choosing love over a $3 billion business deal? What do you mean? Natalie leaned forward, her voice becoming more intense. I mean that Adrian is willing to tell the Yamamoto family the truth about how our marriage began if it means protecting me from your threats. He's prepared to lose everything he's worked for rather than let you hurt me. Victoria stared at her in shock. He would never risk his business for a woman. I know Adrian Kane, and his company means everything to him. You knew the Adrian Kane who existed 3 years ago, Natalie corrected. A man so broken by grief that he couldn't trust anyone enough to love them. But people change, Victoria. Love changes people. You really believe he loves you, Victoria said, and for the first time, her tone held wonder rather than malice. I know he loves me, Natalie said with quiet confidence. The same way I know I love him. Not because of money or status or business deals, but because he makes me laugh when I'm sad, because he holds me when I'm scared, because he sees the best in me even when I can't see it in myself. Victoria was quiet for several minutes, processing Natalie's words. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than it had been all morning. Do you know what it was like, loving someone who treated every emotion like a weakness? She asked. Adrian and I built something beautiful together, but he could never let himself be vulnerable enough to really be with me. I kept hoping that if I was patient enough, successful enough, perfect enough, he'd finally let his walls down. I'm sorry, Natalie said genuinely. That must have been incredibly painful. It was. And when I see him with you, see him being open and affectionate in a way he never was with me. Victoria's voice trailed off. It hurts because you wonder what was wrong with you that you couldn't reach him the way I have, Natalie finished gently. Victoria nodded, tears threatening to spill from her carefully made-up eyes. I've spent 3 years telling myself that Adrian Kane is incapable of love, that his coldness was just who he is. But seeing him with you, seeing how different he is. There was nothing wrong with you, Natalie said firmly. Adrian wasn't ready to love anyone when you were together. His grief was too fresh, his fear too strong. The timing was just wrong. And the timing is right with you? The timing is right for both of us now, Natalie said. I needed someone who could help me save my mother, and Adrian needed someone who could help him remember how to feel human. We healed each other. Victoria wiped away a tear that had escaped, her vulnerability startling after so much calculated hostility. What do you want from me, Natalie? I want you to let us be happy, Natalie said simply. I want you to move forward with your own life instead of being trapped by what you had with Adrian 3 years ago. And I want you to know that just because he couldn't love you the way you needed doesn't mean you're unworthy of that kind of love. You're asking me to give up my leverage against him. I'm asking you to give up your anger against him, Natalie corrected. The leverage was never going to make you happy, Victoria. Destroying Adrian's business might feel like justice, but it won't heal the hurt you've been carrying. Victoria stared out the coffee shop window for a long time, watching people walk by on the busy street. When she finally looked back at Natalie, something fundamental had shifted in her expression. You know, I came into this expecting to hate you, she said with a rueful smile. Adrian's naive little wife who didn't understand the game she was playing. And now I think Adrian is incredibly lucky to have found someone who loves him enough to fight for him this way. Victoria gathered her purse and coat, preparing to leave. I won't be pursuing my investigation any further, Natalie. Your secret is safe. Thank you, Natalie said, relief flooding through her. What changed your mind? Victoria paused at the table, her expression thoughtful. You did. The way you talk about Adrian, the way you're willing to sacrifice your own safety to protect him, that's not the behavior of someone in a fake marriage. That's the behavior of someone desperately in love. After Victoria left, Natalie sat alone in the coffee shop, processing what had just happened. She'd taken an enormous risk coming here without telling Adrian, but something had told her that woman-to-woman honesty might accomplish what legal threats and business negotiations couldn't. Her phone buzzed with a text from Adrian. Where are you? James says. Victoria withdrew her threats. What happened? Instead of texting back, Natalie called him directly. I need to tell you something, and you're probably going to be angry with me. Where are you? Adrian repeated, his voice tight with worry. I'm coming home, she said. And yes, I met with Victoria. I'll explain everything when I get there. The elevator ride up to Adrian's penthouse felt endless, giving Natalie too much time to worry about his reaction. She'd made a major decision that affected both their lives without consulting him, something that went against the partnership they'd been building. She found Adrian pacing in his living room, still wearing his business suit but with his tie loosened and his hair disheveled from running his hands through it. He looked up when she entered, relief and anger warring in his gray eyes. Don't ever do that again, he said immediately, crossing to her in 3 long strides. Don't ever put yourself in potential danger without telling me where you're going. I had to, Natalie said, allowing him to pull her into his arms. Legal threats and business negotiations weren't going to work with Victoria. She needed to hear something different. What could you possibly have said to change her mind? Natalie pulled back to look at his face, seeing the confusion and concern there. I told her the truth. About how our marriage began, about how it changed, about how much we love each other now. Adrian's expression grew incredulous. You told her our marriage started as a business arrangement? I told her everything, Natalie confirmed. Because I realized that Victoria wasn't really trying to destroy your business, Adrian. She was trying to prove that you're incapable of love, that what we have couldn't be real. And you convinced her otherwise by confirming her suspicions? I convinced her otherwise by showing her what real love looks like, Natalie said, reaching up to touch his cheek. I talked about the way you hold me when I'm scared, the way you learn my mother's favorite tea, the way you're willing to risk everything to protect me. I showed her that what we have now is genuine, even if it didn't start that way. Adrian stared at her for a long moment, processing her words. You risked our entire future on the hope that your honesty would appeal to Victoria's better nature? I risked our future on my belief that love is stronger than revenge, Natalie corrected. And I was right. Suddenly, Adrian laughed, a rich, genuine sound that filled the room with warmth. You are the most amazing, terrifying, incredible woman I've ever known, he said, spinning her around in his arms. I can't believe you faced down Victoria Chin and won by telling her the truth. Sometimes the truth is the most powerful weapon you have, Natalie said as he set her down, both of them laughing now with relief and joy. I love you, Adrian said, cupping her face in his hands. I love your courage, your compassion, your ridiculous optimism that sees the best in everyone, including my vengeful ex-business partner. I love you too, Natalie replied. Even when you're overprotective and want to fight all my battles for me. Speaking of which, Adrian said, his expression growing serious again, promise me you won't make any more unilateral decisions about our relationship. We're partners in this, Natalie. Real partners. That means we face things together. I promise, she said solemnly. As long as you promise to let me face them with you instead of trying to shield me from everything. Deal, Adrian agreed, then kissed her with a passion that made her knees weak. That evening, as they celebrated their victory over Victoria's threats with champagne and takeout from their favorite Chinese restaurant, Natalie marveled at how much their relationship had evolved. They'd started as employer and employee, moved to fake husband and wife, and now they were real partners in every sense of the word. What are you thinking about? Adrian asked, noticing her contemplative mood. Just how different everything is now, she said, curling up beside him on the couch. 6 months ago I was just trying to survive. Now I'm married to the man I love, my mother is getting the treatment she needs, and we're planning a real future together. What kind of future do you want? Adrian asked, his arm tightening around her. The kind where we wake up together every morning for the next 50 years, Natalie said without hesitation. Where we have children who inherit your determination and my stubbornness. Where we build something together that's about more than just business success. That sounds perfect, Adrian said, kissing the top of her head. Though I think our children might be in trouble if they get both my determination and your stubbornness. They'll be unstoppable, Natalie laughed. Just like their parents. As they sat together in comfortable silence, both lost in dreams of their future, neither of them noticed the envelope that had been slipped under their door earlier that evening. It would remain there, unnoticed, until the next morning, when its contents would present them with their greatest challenge yet. The envelope contained a single photograph and a note written in elegant handwriting. Natalie found it the next morning when she went to retrieve the newspaper, her blood running cold as she recognized the image. Herself and Victoria Chin sitting together in the coffee shop, deep in conversation that clearly looked friendly and conspiratorial to an outside observer. The note was brief but chilling. Interesting that Mrs. Kane would meet privately with her husband's business rival. One wonders what they discussed. Perhaps the Yamamoto family would be curious as well. A concerned observer. Adrian? Natalie called out, her voice tight with panic as she rushed back into the penthouse. We have a problem. She found him in his home office, already dressed for work and reviewing contracts over coffee. He looked up at her worried tone, immediately setting aside his papers when he saw the photograph in her hands. Where did this come from? He asked grimly, studying the image that made their meeting look far more sinister than it had been. Someone slipped it under our door, Natalie said, sinking into the chair across from his desk. Adrian, if the Yamamotos see this picture without context, they'll think I was conspiring with Victoria behind your back. Or they'll think we're all working together in some elaborate scheme, Adrian said, his business mind immediately jumping to the worst possible interpretations. A photograph of my wife meeting secretly with the woman who was investigating our marriage doesn't exactly scream innocence. The timing couldn't have been worse. The Yamamoto family was scheduled to finalize their partnership contracts that afternoon, and any suggestion of deception or conspiracy could destroy everything they'd worked for. Even worse, Hiroshi Yamamoto had specifically praised the trust and honesty he'd observed in their marriage. This photograph suggested exactly the opposite. Who would have taken this? Natalie asked, trying to think through their options. Who even knew about our meeting? Victoria might have arranged it, Adrian suggested, but he sounded doubtful. Though I can't see what she'd gain from sabotaging the resolution she agreed to yesterday. Could it be someone else? Another business rival or competitor? Before Adrian could answer, his phone rang with a call from James Peterson, his lead attorney. The conversation was brief but devastating. Someone had sent copies of the photograph to the Yamamoto family's hotel with a note suggesting they might want to reconsider their business partnership with Kane Industries. How bad is this? Natalie asked after Adrian hung up, though his expression already told her everything she needed to know. Kenji Yamamoto is requesting an emergency meeting this morning, Adrian said, loosening his tie as if it was suddenly too tight. He wants to discuss concerning developments that have come to their attention. We tell them the truth, Natalie said firmly. We explain exactly what happened and why I met with Victoria. The truth makes us look worse, not better, Adrian pointed out. How do we explain that you met with a woman who was blackmailing us about our fake marriage without admitting that our marriage actually was fake, at least initially? It was an impossible situation. Telling the truth would confirm the Yamamoto's worst suspicions about their marriage being a business arrangement, while lying would be discovered eventually and make them look even more deceptive. There has to be a way, Natalie said desperately. We can't let some anonymous troublemaker destroy everything we've worked for. Maybe it's time to accept that we've been fighting a losing battle, Adrian said quietly, his voice heavy with defeat. Maybe the universe is trying to tell us that what we built together is too fragile to survive in the real world. Don't you dare give up on us, Natalie said fiercely, standing up to face him across the desk. We've overcome every obstacle so far. We can overcome this one too. How? By lying to people who value honesty above all else? By asking them to trust us when we can't even explain why my wife was secretly meeting with someone who wanted to destroy our marriage? By showing them who we really are, Natalie said, an idea beginning to form in her mind. Adrian, what if we don't try to explain away the photograph? What if we use this meeting as an opportunity to tell the Yamamotos everything, the whole truth about how our marriage began and how it became real? Adrian stared at her as if she'd lost her mind. That's business suicide, Natalie. The moment they learn our marriage started as a contract, they'll withdraw from every partnership agreement we've signed. Or they'll respect our honesty and see that what we have now is genuine, Natalie countered. Hiroshi Yamamoto is a wise man. He understands that relationships can evolve, that love can grow in unexpected ways. It's too big a risk. Bigger than losing each other? Natalie asked softly. Because if we let this photograph destroy our marriage, if we let fear and business concerns drive us apart, then we'll have lost something much more valuable than any contract. Adrian was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. You're willing to risk everything we've built professionally on the hope that the Yamamotos will understand? I'm willing to risk everything professionally to save what we've built personally, she corrected. Our marriage, our love, our future together, that's worth more than all the business deals in the world. 2 hours later, they sat in the elegant conference room at the Yamamoto family's hotel, facing Hiroshi, Kenji, and Akiko across a polished mahogany table. The photograph lay between them like an accusation, its implications hanging heavy in the air. Mr. and Mrs. Kane, Hiroshi said formally, his usual warmth replaced by careful distance. We have received some disturbing information that calls into question the nature of your relationship and, by extension, your fitness as business partners. We understand your concerns, Adrian said, his voice steady despite the tension radiating from his body. And we want to address them as honestly as possible. The photograph shows Mrs. Kane meeting privately with Victoria Chen, Kenji said, his tone businesslike and cold. Miss Chen has been making inquiries about your marriage, suggesting it may not be what it appears. When your wife meets secretly with someone making such allegations. It looks like conspiracy, Akiko finished gently, her expression sad rather than angry. We had such faith in your marriage as a symbol of your character, Adrian. To discover potential deception is deeply troubling. Natalie looked at Adrian, seeing him struggle with the decision that would determine their future. She reached across the table and took his hand, squeezing gently in a gesture of support and encouragement. You're right to be concerned, Adrian said finally, his voice growing stronger as he made his choice. Our marriage is not what it initially appeared to be, and you deserve to know the complete truth. Hiroshi's expression grew stern, but he gestured for Adrian to continue. 6 months ago, Natalie was my assistant, nothing more. She was struggling financially due to her mother's medical expenses, and I was facing the challenge of convincing traditional business partners that I was a stable family man despite being a lifelong bachelor. The Yamamotos listened in silence as Adrian explained their original arrangement, the business contract, the fake wedding, the planned temporary marriage that was supposed to end after their deal was completed. So our marriage did begin as a business transaction, Adrian continued, his hand tightening around Natalie's. But something neither of us expected happened during those months of pretending to be married. What happened? Hiroshi asked, his tone unreadable. We fell in love, Natalie said, her voice clear and strong. Really, truly, completely in love. What started as a performance became the most genuine relationship either of us has ever experienced. And the meeting with Miss Chin? Kenji asked. Victoria was threatening to expose our original arrangement unless Adrian agreed to a business partnership that would have essentially given her control over half his company, Natalie explained. I met with her to appeal to her better nature, to help her understand that our marriage had become real even if it didn't start that way. You risked everything on the hope that your honesty would change her mind? Akiko asked with surprise. I risked everything because I love my husband and couldn't bear the thought of our future being destroyed by someone else's anger, Natalie said simply. Sometimes love makes you brave enough to do things that seem impossible. The conference room was quiet for several long minutes as the Yamamoto family processed their confession. Adrian and Natalie sat hand in hand, waiting for judgment that would determine not just their business future but potentially their personal one as well. Finally, Hiroshi spoke. You are telling us that you deceived us from the beginning about the nature of your marriage. Yes, Adrian said without hesitation. We are. And that everything we observed about your relationship, the affection, the support, the genuine care for one another, was originally performance? Originally, yes, Natalie admitted. But not anymore. What you see between us now is completely real. Hiroshi exchanged glances with his son and daughter-in-law, some silent communication passing between them. When he looked back at Adrian and Natalie, his expression was thoughtful rather than angry. In our culture, he said slowly, we have a concept called tsundeku, the act of acquiring something with the intention of using it for one purpose, only to discover it serves a completely different and more meaningful purpose than originally planned. Adrian and Natalie waited breathlessly as Hiroshi continued. You entered into marriage as a business strategy but discovered love. Many couples begin with love and discover only business. Which is more honest, to admit your journey was unconventional, or to pretend conventional beginnings when they did not exist? We should have told you from the beginning, Adrian said. I understand if you can no longer trust us as business partners. On the contrary, Kenji said, surprising them both. Your willingness to confess something that could destroy your professional reputation tells me more about your character than any conventional love story could have. You chose honesty over profit, Akiko added with a smile. You chose your marriage over your business. These are the actions of people we can trust completely. Hiroshi stood and Adrian and Natalie rose as well, uncertain what would happen next. To their amazement, the older man bowed respectfully. Mr. and Mrs. Kane, he said formally, Yamamoto Industries is honored to continue our partnership with people of such courage and integrity. We look forward to many years of successful business together. As they shook hands and exchanged bows, Natalie felt tears of relief and joy streaming down her face. They had gambled everything on the truth and won not just their business partnership, but the respect and admiration of people whose opinion truly mattered. How did you know? Adrian asked as they prepared to leave. How did you know we were telling the truth about loving each other now? Hiroshi smiled, the first genuinely warm expression he'd shown all morning. Because, my dear Adrian, no one risks losing everything for someone they do not truly love. Your wife's willingness to meet with your enemy to protect you, your willingness to confess everything to protect her, this is not the behavior of business partners. This is the behavior of true partners in life. That evening, as they celebrated their victory with champagne and Chinese takeout, it was becoming their tradition. Natalie marveled at how the truth had ultimately set them free rather than destroying them. I still can't believe they were more impressed by our honesty than offended by our deception, she said, curled up against Adrian's side on their couch. I think they recognized something we're still learning ourselves, Adrian replied, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. That love doesn't always follow conventional paths, but when it's real, it's worth fighting for no matter how it began. So what happens now? Natalie asked. We're legally married, genuinely in love and professionally successful. Do we just live happily ever after? First, we figure out who took that photograph and tried to sabotage us, Adrian said, his protective instincts still sharp. Then we start planning our real future together, the one where every decision we make is because we want to, not because we have to. And then we live happily ever after? Natalie asked with a smile. Then we work every day to deserve the happiness we've found, Adrian corrected gently. Because the best love stories aren't about perfect beginnings, Natalie. They're about imperfect people choosing each other every single day. As they sat together in their home, surrounded by the life they'd built together through deception, truth, fear, courage, and ultimately love, both Adrian and Natalie knew that their unconventional beginning had led them to something neither had dared to dream of. A partnership built on complete honesty, mutual respect, and the kind of love that makes people brave enough to risk everything for each other. But their story wasn't over yet. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to choose each other, and new ways to prove that the most beautiful love stories often begin with the words, "This is crazy, but what if we tried?" The identity of their anonymous photographer was revealed in the most unexpected way possible. 3 days after their successful meeting with the Yamamotos, Natalie received a phone call from Mount Sinai Hospital that initially filled her with terror. until she realized her mother was calling to congratulate her. "Sweetheart," Eleanor Brooks said, her voice stronger than it had been in months thanks to the new "sweetheart," Eleanor Brooks said, her voice stronger than it had been in months thanks to the new treatment. "I just had the most interesting conversation with a young man who claims to be a journalist writing a story about successful business marriages." Natalie's stomach dropped. What kind of questions was he asking? "Oh, all sorts of things about your relationship with Adrian, how quickly you two got together, whether I thought it was genuine love or just convenient timing." Eleanor's tone grew suspicious. "He seemed very interested in the timeline of your romance and your financial situation before the marriage." "Mom, what exactly did you tell him?" "The truth, of course," Eleanor said firmly. "That I raised my daughter to marry for love, not money, and that anyone who spent 5 minutes watching you and Adrian together would know you're completely devoted to each other. I also told him that any reporter who was really interested in love stories would focus on how beautiful your relationship is now, not dig around looking for dirt about how it started." After hanging up, Natalie immediately called Adrian, who was in back-to-back meetings all afternoon. When she explained about the journalist, his reaction was swift and decisive. "I'm hiring additional security," he said immediately. "Someone is clearly determined to destroy what we've built, and I won't have you or your mother harassed." "Adrian, maybe we should consider going public ourselves," Natalie suggested. "Control the narrative instead of letting someone else write it." "What do you mean?" "I mean, what if we tell our own story? The real story from the beginning. Show people that love can grow in unexpected ways, that sometimes the best relationships begin as something else entirely." That evening, they met with Adrian's public relations team to discuss the possibility of a preemptive media strategy. The idea was risky but potentially brilliant. By sharing their story themselves, they could frame it as a romance about finding unexpected love rather than a scandal about business deception. "The key would be complete honesty," explained Sarah Kim, Adrian's head of public relations. "No half-truths or strategic omissions. People can sense authenticity, and your story is actually quite romantic when told properly." "How is a fake marriage romantic?" Adrian asked skeptically. "Because it became real," Sarah said simply. "Because two people who thought they were too damaged for love found healing in each other. Because you chose each other every day until choosing each other became as natural as breathing." The plan they developed was elegant in its simplicity. Adrian would give an exclusive interview to a respected business magazine, telling the complete story of their unconventional beginning and genuine ending. Natalie would participate as well, showing the world the woman who had captured the heart of one of New York's most eligible bachelors. But before they could implement their media strategy, their anonymous tormentor made another move. Natalie was leaving her weekly visit with her mother when she noticed a man following her through the hospital corridors. He was young, maybe late 20s, with nervous energy and a camera that he tried to keep hidden under his jacket. Instead of running or calling for help, Natalie did something that surprised them both. She stopped and turned to face him directly. "Are you the one who's been taking pictures of me?" she asked calmly. The young man looked startled, clearly not expecting this direct approach. I'm just doing a job, ma'am." "What's your name?" Natalie asked, noting his expensive camera equipment and designer clothes that seemed inconsistent with typical paparazzi work. "Tyler," he said reluctantly. "Tyler Morrison." "Who hired you, Tyler? Who's paying you to follow me and my family?" Tyler's composure crumbled completely. "Look, I didn't know it was going to get this complicated, okay? I thought it was just a simple infidelity investigation, but then things got weird." "Infidelity investigation?" Natalie repeated, confused. "My client said her ex-husband was having an affair with his assistant, wanted proof for divorce proceedings. But when I started following you guys, it became obvious you were married, not having an affair. Then my client got really interested in your marriage timeline, started asking specific questions about business deals and family finances." "Tyler," Natalie said gently, recognizing someone who was in over his head, "I think your client lied to you about what kind of investigation this was." "Yeah, I'm starting to figure that out," Tyler said miserably. "Especially after she asked me to send photos to some Japanese business people. That's not normal divorce stuff." "What's your client's name?" Tyler hesitated, clearly conflicted between professional discretion and growing ethical concerns. "I probably shouldn't." "Tyler, my husband and I have been completely honest with the people who matter about our relationship," Natalie said firmly. "But someone is trying to destroy our lives with partial truths and manipulated information. If you really are just doing a job, then you deserve to know what job you're actually doing." "Rebecca Sterling," Tyler said finally. "She said Adrian Kane was her ex-husband, that he'd married you to hide assets in their divorce. Natalie had never heard the name Rebecca Sterling, but something about it nagged at her memory. That evening she and Adrian tried to figure out who this woman was and why she was targeting them. "I've never been married before," Adrian said, reviewing his mental catalog of past relationships. "Never even been engaged. I have no idea who Rebecca Sterling is. Could she be using a fake name?" Natalie suggested. "Possible, but why would someone go to such elaborate lengths? Hiring a private investigator, creating false stories about divorce proceedings." The answer came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Henderson, Adrian's longtime housekeeper, overheard them discussing Rebecca Sterling and immediately recognized the name. "Oh, that's Miss Rebecca," she said, setting down Adrian's evening coffee. "She worked in your father's office years ago before the accident. Nice young woman, very ambitious. She had quite the crush on you, Mr. Adrian." "Rebecca from Dad's firm?" Adrian said, memory suddenly flooding back. "I haven't thought about her in years. She was a junior associate when I was still in college. She used to ask me about your favorite foods, your schedule, whether you were dating anyone," Mrs. Henderson continued. "I always thought she hoped you'd notice her romantically, but then the accident happened and everything changed." "That was 10 years ago," Natalie said, trying to understand the motivation. "Why would she resurface now with some elaborate revenge scheme?" "Because she's been watching and waiting all these years," Adrian said grimly. "Waiting for me to fall in love with someone so she could try to destroy it." "But why? What did you ever do to her?" Adrian was quiet for a long moment, piecing together memories he'd buried under years of grief and work. "I think I might have hurt her without realizing it. Right after my family died, when I was a complete mess, she reached out to offer comfort and support. I was so lost in grief that I didn't recognize it as romantic interest. I probably treated her kindness as pity and pushed her away cruelly. So she spent 10 years planning revenge because you rejected her when you were grieving?" Natalie asked incredulously. "People have done worse things for less compelling reasons," Adrian said sadly. "And if she's been watching my life all these years, seeing me build success while remaining emotionally unavailable, then suddenly seeing me happy with you. She wants to prove that you're incapable of real love," Natalie finished, understanding flooding through her. "Just like Victoria did, but for different reasons." The next day they arranged to meet Rebecca Sterling face to face. She agreed to come to Adrian's office, probably expecting to confront a man who didn't even remember her existence. Instead, she found Adrian and Natalie waiting together, presenting a united front that clearly wasn't what she'd anticipated. Rebecca had aged well, still attractive in her early 30s with carefully styled blonde hair and expensive clothes that spoke of professional success. But there was something brittle about her smile, something desperate in her eyes that made Natalie feel more pity than anger. "Adrian," Rebecca said, her voice artificially bright. "You look wonderful. Marriage agrees with you." "Rebecca," Adrian replied calmly. "I understand you've been having me investigated. I'd like to know why." "Can't an old friend be curious about your happiness?" Rebecca asked, but her mask was already slipping. "Especially when that happiness appears so convenient." "Convenient how?" "Oh, please," Rebecca's voice turned sharp. "You expect me to believe that the great Adrian Kane, the man who spent 10 years avoiding any emotional connection, suddenly fell head over heels for his little assistant? Right before a major business deal that required you to appear stable and family-oriented. Whether you believe it or not doesn't change the truth," Natalie said gently. "Adrian and I are genuinely happy together." "Happy?" Rebecca laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Do you know what it was like watching him shut down completely after his family died? Do you know how many times I tried to reach him to help him heal, only to be treated like an annoyance?" "I'm sorry," Adrian said sincerely. "I was drowning in grief back then and I hurt people who were trying to help me. That wasn't fair to you." "Sorry?" Rebecca's composure cracked completely. "I spent 2 years trying to show you that someone could love you, that you didn't have to be alone. But you were so determined to punish yourself for surviving that you couldn't see what was right in front of you." "You're right," Adrian admitted. "I was blind to everything except my own pain. But Rebecca, that was 10 years ago. Why are you trying to destroy my marriage now?" "Because it's not real," Rebecca exploded. "Because after all these years of telling myself that Adrian Kane was simply incapable of love, I have to watch you play house with some girl who's obviously using you for money?" "She's not using me," Adrian said firmly. "And our marriage is completely real." "Prove it," Rebecca challenged. "Prove that this isn't just an elaborate business arrangement. Prove that she'd stay with you if you lost everything tomorrow." I don't have to prove anything to you, Adrian replied. But I'll tell you something that might help you understand. Natalie met with Victoria Chin privately, risking our entire relationship, to protect me from blackmail. She convinced Victoria to drop her threats not through deals or negotiations, but through honesty about how much she loves me. Rebecca stared at them both, searching for cracks in their united front. And you? She asked Natalie. What's your proof that this isn't just about his money? I don't need proof, Natalie said simply. I need Adrian. His money, his business, his reputation, none of that matters compared to having him in my life. He makes me laugh when I'm sad, holds me when I'm scared, and loves me in a way that makes me braver than I ever thought possible. That's not proof, that's poetry, Rebecca said dismissively. No, Adrian said, standing and moving to Natalie's side, that's love. Real, imperfect, complicated love that grew from the most unlikely circumstances. And Rebecca, the reason you can't see it is because you're still looking for the broken man I was 10 years ago instead of seeing the man I've become. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, her anger slowly draining away to reveal the pain underneath. I wasted so much time, she whispered. So many years thinking that if I just waited long enough, you'd realize what we could have had together. You didn't waste time, Natalie said gently. You built a successful career, created a life for yourself. That's not waste, that's strength. But it's not the life I wanted, Rebecca admitted. I wanted him. I know, Natalie said with genuine sympathy. But wanting someone who can't love you back is a prison you build for yourself. Adrian couldn't love you 10 years ago because he was too broken, and he can't love you now because he's chosen to love me instead. Neither of those things is your fault. So what am I supposed to do now? Rebecca asked, looking lost and vulnerable. How do I stop wanting something I can never have? You start wanting something you can have, Adrian said kindly. You find someone who can appreciate the loyalty and devotion you've shown, even if it was misdirected. You deserve to be loved, Rebecca. Just not by me. I've been so angry for so long, Rebecca said, tears finally spilling over. I don't know how to let it go. One day at a time, Natalie suggested. One choice at a time to look forward instead of backward. When Rebecca finally left that afternoon, she looked smaller somehow, as if releasing her decade-old anger had diminished her physically. She promised to call off Tyler Morrison and delete any photos or information she'd collected, asking only that they not pursue legal action against her. She's not a bad person, Natalie said as they watched Rebecca's car disappear into Manhattan traffic. Just someone who got stuck in the past. Like I was before I met you, Adrian agreed, pulling her close. You saved me from becoming someone like that, Natalie. Someone so focused on old pain that I couldn't see new possibilities. That evening they had dinner with Eleanor Brooks, who was feeling well enough to visit their penthouse for the first time. As they sat around Adrian's dining table sharing stories and laughter, Natalie marveled at how their unconventional family had come together. You know, Eleanor said as Adrian cleared the dishes, he'd insisted on cooking and serving dinner himself. When Natalie first told me about you, I was worried she was rushing into something for the wrong reasons. What changed your mind? Adrian asked, genuinely curious. Watching you with her now, Eleanor said simply. Seeing how you anticipate her needs, how you light up when she laughs, how you touch her like she's precious to you. That's not something you can fake, and it's not something money can buy. She's the most precious thing in my life, Adrian said, his hand finding Natalie's across the table. Both of you are family to me now. As they said goodnight to Eleanor and settled in for the evening, Natalie reflected on how much their lives had changed in just a few months. They'd gone from strangers to fake spouses to real partners, weathering attacks from multiple enemies and emerging stronger each time. Do you ever regret it? She asked Adrian as they got ready for bed. The whole complicated mess of how we got together? Never, Adrian said immediately. Do you? Only sometimes when I think about how we could have met under normal circumstances, without all the drama and deception. If we'd met under normal circumstances, Adrian pointed out, I would have been the same closed-off, emotionally unavailable man I was before. I needed our arrangement to force me to spend time with you, to get to know you well enough to fall in love. So you think the universe arranged our fake marriage so we could find real love? Natalie asked with a smile. I think the universe works in mysterious ways, Adrian replied, pulling her into his arms. And I think sometimes the best things come from the most unexpected places. As they fell asleep together that night, both Adrian and Natalie felt the peace that comes from knowing their love had been tested by external threats and internal doubts, and had emerged victorious every time. They'd proven to themselves and the world that genuine love could grow from the most unlikely circumstances, that choosing each other every day was more important than how they'd found each other in the first place. But their story still had one more chapter to write, one final choice to make that would determine not just their happiness, but their legacy as a couple who dared to turn a business arrangement into the kind of love story people tell their grandchildren. 6 months later, Natalie stood in the bridal suite of the Plaza Hotel, looking at her reflection in an antique mirror that had seen countless brides prepare for their weddings. But unlike those other women, Natalie was preparing for her second marriage to the same man, this time with all the joy and ceremony their first courthouse wedding had lacked. "You look absolutely radiant," her mother said, adjusting the delicate veil that had belonged to Adrian's grandmother. Eleanor Brooks looked healthy and strong, her cancer in remission thanks to the treatments that Adrian's generosity had made possible. "Your father would be so proud." "I wish he could be here," Natalie said softly, touching the diamond necklace Adrian had given her, a family heirloom that symbolized her true place in his life. "He's here, sweetheart. Love like that never really leaves us." The decision to have a second wedding ceremony had been Adrian's idea. "I want to marry you again," he'd said one evening as they walked through Central Park. "Not because we have to, not because of business or contracts or any other reason except that I love you and want to celebrate that love with everyone who matters to us." The guest list was small but meaningful. The Yamamoto family who had flown in from Tokyo, Adrian's business associates who had become genuine friends, Eleanor Brooks and the medical team who had saved her life, the children from the cancer ward who had adopted Adrian and Natalie as honorary family, and Mrs. Henderson who had watched Adrian transform from a broken man into someone capable of profound love. Even Victoria Chen had sent a beautiful arrangement of white roses with a note, "Wishing you both every happiness. Thank you for teaching me what real love looks like." A soft knock at the door interrupted Natalie's preparations. "Come in," she called, expecting to see the wedding coordinator. Instead, Tyler Morrison peered around the door, looking nervous but hopeful. "Mrs. Kane? I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to ask if I could photograph your ceremony. Free of charge, of course. As an apology for, well, everything." "Tyler," Natalie said with genuine warmth, "I'd be honored to have you as our wedding photographer. But only if you promise to capture the joy, not look for scandal." "I promise," Tyler said solemnly. "And Mrs. Kane? Thank you for giving me a second chance. Most people wouldn't have been so kind after what I did." "Everyone deserves a second chance," Natalie replied. "That's what this whole day is about, second chances and new beginnings." When the music began, Natalie walked down the aisle of the plaza's elegant ballroom on her mother's arm, since Eleanor had insisted on giving her daughter away. But her eyes were only for Adrian, who stood at the altar looking devastatingly handsome in his black tuxedo, his gray eyes bright with unshed tears as he watched her approach. "You're so beautiful," he whispered as she reached his side, his voice thick with emotion. "You're not so bad yourself," she whispered back, earning a smile that transformed his entire face. The ceremony was officiated by Hiroshi Yamamoto, who had become ordained online specifically for their wedding. His presence as officiant was a symbol of how their business relationship had evolved into genuine family friendship. "Adrian and Natalie," Hiroshi began, his voice carrying the wisdom of his years, "you have taught us all that love is not about perfect beginnings, but about perfect commitment. Your journey together began with practical needs but has become something transcendent, a partnership built on mutual respect, genuine affection, and the courage to choose each other every day." When it came time for vows, Adrian and Natalie had written their own words, speaking from hearts that had been transformed by their unconventional love story. "Natalie," Adrian said, his voice strong and clear, "6 months ago I thought I was hiring an assistant. What I actually did was invite my soulmate into my life. You've taught me that vulnerability is strength, that love is not weakness but the greatest power in the universe. I promise to choose you every morning, support you every evening, and love you through every challenge life brings us." "Adrian," Natalie replied, her own voice steady despite the tears streaming down her cheeks, "you showed me that home isn't a place, it's a person. You make me braver, kinder, and more myself than I ever thought possible. I promise to stand beside you in success and failure, to laugh with you in joy and comfort you in sorrow, and to build with you a love that grows stronger with each passing day." When Hiroshi pronounced them husband and wife, for the second time and forever, Adrian's kiss was tender and passionate, a seal on promises that had already been tested by fire and proven true. The reception was a celebration of family in all its forms. Natalie danced with the young cancer patients who had become her honorary siblings, while Adrian played piano for the first time in public since his own family's death, a hauntingly beautiful piece he'd composed for Natalie called Unexpected Grace. "You know," Kenji Yamamoto said during his toast, "in business we often talk about return on investment. Adrian and Natalie have shown us that the greatest returns come not from financial investments, but from investments in each other. Their love has enriched everyone who knows them." As the evening wound down, Natalie and Adrian found themselves on the plaza's terrace, looking out over Central Park where they'd taken so many walks while learning to love each other. "Do you think we'll have a normal marriage now?" Natalie asked, her head resting on Adrian's shoulder. "I hope not," Adrian replied, making her laugh. "Normal is overrated. I prefer extraordinary, and that's what we are together." "What do you see when you imagine our future now?" she asked, the same question she'd posed months earlier when they were still pretending. "I see Sunday mornings in bed reading the newspaper together. I see arguments about whose turn it is to take out the trash. I see you growing round with our children and me becoming the kind of father mine would have been proud of. I see growing old together and still holding hands at 80. That sounds perfectly imperfect," Natalie said with a smile. "The best love stories always are." 1 year later, Natalie sat in the rocking chair Adrian had insisted on placing in their nursery, holding their 3-month-old daughter Isabella Eleanor Kane, named for the sister Adrian had lost and the mother Natalie cherished. The baby had Adrian's gray eyes and Natalie's stubborn streak, and she was absolutely perfect. "How are my girls doing?" Adrian asked softly, entering the nursery after a long day at the office. "Better now that you're home," Natalie replied, watching as Adrian gently took Isabella from her arms. The sight of her powerful husband cradling their tiny daughter with infinite tenderness never failed to take her breath away. "Any word from the hospital about your mother's latest tests?" Adrian asked as he settled Isabella in her crib. "Clean bill of health for the 6th month running," Natalie said happily. "Dr. Peterson says she's officially in remission and can start planning that European vacation she's always dreamed about. Then we'll send her first class," Adrian said immediately. "She's earned it." As they stood together watching their daughter sleep, Natalie marveled at the life they'd built from such unlikely beginnings. Their love story had started with a desperate business proposal and had become something beautiful and lasting, a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, truth over deception, and each other over everything else. "Do you think Isabella will be embarrassed when she's older and learns how we met?" Natalie asked. "I think she'll be proud that her parents were brave enough to take a chance on love, even when it seemed impossible," Adrian replied, pulling Natalie close. "I think she'll understand that the best things in life often come disguised as something else entirely. Like a millionaire CEO who asked for his assistant's help with business but ended up asking for her heart instead?" Natalie suggested with a smile. "Exactly like that," Adrian agreed, kissing her softly in the gentle light of their daughter's nursery. "The best decision I ever made was falling in love with you, Natalie Kane." "The best decision I ever made was saying yes to your crazy proposal," she replied. "All of them." As they held each other in the quiet of their home, surrounded by the family they'd created together, both Adrian and Natalie knew that their love story was far from over. There would be more challenges ahead, more opportunities to choose each other, more moments of joy and sorrow to navigate together. But they also knew that whatever came next, they would face it as they had faced everything else, hand in hand, heart to heart, choosing love every single day until choosing love became as natural and essential as breathing itself. Their unconventional beginning had led them to the most conventional and precious of endings, a family built on genuine love, mutual respect, and the unwavering commitment to be each other's home for the rest of their lives. Dear readers, thank you so much for joining Adrian and Natalie on their incredible journey from a business arrangement to true love. Their story proves that sometimes the most beautiful relationships begin in the most unexpected ways. I'd love to hear from you. What was your favorite moment in their story? Did you see their love coming from the beginning, or were you surprised by how genuine their feelings became? Have you ever experienced a relationship that started one way and became something completely different? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Also, what kind of love story would you like to see next? Enemies to lovers? Second chance romance? Friends to lovers? Your suggestions help inspire future stories. Don't forget to like this story if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more heartwarming romance tales that will make you believe in the power of unexpected love.